So we had something in create orders that we weren't really able to completely finish off, but we want to finish off now. So we had add line items right here. And if we take a look, we have a new SKU drop down read. All right, so let me get this information. Okay, so there's an element here called, we have SKU has vars. This is Luigi's data, so you should have the same SKU. And we're looking at this information right here is what we're going to be wanting to use. So let's go ahead and look back in the UI, and let's kind of see if we can close this down a little bit. Oh, that's that full thing. So, okay. So if we come here, we have this has vars. So you can see you're doing this correctly. Remember we talked about primary each and secondary quantity, and you see that they put the values in there, and so that's correct. We're going to put 1 in here, and when we put 1 in there, we do this recommended element over here, but it's kind of hard to read. That's a good question. What do we want to do there? Okay, so what we want to do here is make a revision. We want to change those, and we can make them a little bit bigger, but let's change it to primary quant and secondary quantity. That way it will leave more room for that, and then you can just put the number in there instead of having to do the recommended amount. So that will give us a little more space, but we can make those fields just a little bit bigger, just in general. So that's going good. One thing we do want to do is when this first comes into here, we want these to both be red, because what we really need is we need one of these to be entered in. So if we have them both be red, as soon as they enter in 1, then they'll both unbe red, because we need one value in one of them to be required. And so they'll both be red until they enter 1, and then they'll both be removed as red. And that, of course, would affect the ability to, add a line item that's in there. Now remember, we want to send back to these elements, no matter if they only entered one primary quantity right here, and we do an add a line item in here. You see we did the secondary quantity and the secondary units, so that's right, we want to add that back correctly, but we also have another little thing in there called primary is integral or secondary is integral. What this means is that they have to be whole units, right? So you would have to round up. So let's kind of start from the beginning again. If we come here, has vars, so this starts out right. We put those different units of measure on there. However, we want to change this to primary quantity like that and secondary quantity. And then I come and I put 1, and that comes out here. And what we'd want to do is, because this is, you can't really see the recommended, so let's kind of get rid of, let's do one over here. So this number 2, because we have is integral, that has to be a whole unit. So this one over here probably says 0.5, right? I can't really see it right now, but once we make these smaller, it will be. But since it's integral, it has to be a whole unit, so it would have to be 1. We always round up. So if it's 0.1, it still goes up to 1, right? And everything to that effect. So, but if I came in here, I can still do the override, right? So if I have 1 and 3, and I add the line item, then you did that right. It added 1 and 3. But if I came here and did has vars and did let's just say 1 here, right, and added the line item, you have 1 and 0.5. So it'd actually be 1 and 1 because the secondary unit is integral, and vice versa. And then of course the other thing we said is of course when you select a skew, that secondary thing only pops up if it has a secondary unit. So you can see you're doing this correctly. Has vars, this one is probably the only one that actually has a secondary unit of measure on it right now. So that's what you can use for testing. But then the other thing is just to make sure that these boxes are both in red, and then it disappears once you enter in a value into one of them. It allows you to go ahead and continue. So you pretty much have this all working the correct way. We just have to change those labels a little bit so it's a little bit shorter. And then we just need to go ahead and make sure that we, for the integral flag, that any rounding that we're doing is always going to, always rounds up to the nearest whole unit. So if it's a decimal, you know, and it could be, if it's 1.5, then it would have to be, or 1.1, then it would round up to 2, right? So the idea being is you always have to round up to the next whole unit. So 1.1 would, you know, go to 2. Everything goes to a whole integer. We don't have any decimals on is integral. Now if is integral is false, then you can go ahead and have decimals. And that's how it will work, and then it should be fine that way. So that's it for that.